Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Matthew 11:28. Shh. You've done enough today. The worries can wait. The world can wait. Right now, this is your time. A time for stillness. A time for breath. A time to draw near to the gentle presence of Jesus. Perhaps your heart feels worn. Perhaps your body aches in quiet places. Or maybe you just need someone to remind you that you're not alone tonight. So come, find your favorite chair. Let the soft lamp glow beside you and listen. These stories are not loud. They do not hurry. They arrive like whispers, like pages turning in the quiet, like God Himself sitting beside you, holding your hand. Stay here for a while. Let every word be a step toward rest. Let each pause be a doorway into peace. You are safe here. You are loved here. And Jesus, He is already here. In peace, I will lie down and sleep. For you alone. Lord, make me dwell in safety. Psalm 104:8. It had been a long day, the kind of day that doesn't shout, but weighs. Little disappointments, quiet aches, an old memory drifting in like fog, a voice left unanswered, a chair left empty, and now the light is fading, the house is still, your body is tired, but it's your heart that sighs the loudest. So come now, not with strength, but with surrender, not to do anything, but simply to rest. Tonight's story is not a lesson, not a sermon, not a goal to reach. It's a gentle walk beside Jesus, under a canopy of stars. He doesn't rush. He doesn't correct. He just walks at your pace. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. You've done enough for today. You are not forgotten, and you are not alone. Jesus is here, and He's walking you home. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Matthew 11:28. It began with the softest breeze, not a gust, not a chill, just a gentle stirring in the tall grass, the kind that brushes your cheek like the hem of a passing robe. The meadow was still and wide, kissed by the last gold light of the evening. It stretched out beneath the soft shadow of a low hill, where a few old trees leaned into the sky as if in prayer. And there, in the hush of twilight, walked Miriam. She was not young, not anymore. Her knees ached more than they used to. Her hands remembered stories her voice had long stopped telling, but still she walked, slowly, gently, each footfall steady in the hush. Her shoes were worn, her scarf had frayed at the edges, and yet she carried something deeper than age. She carried memory. Miriam used to visit this meadow often when she was a girl. Back then, the world had felt bigger, the sky wider. She had chased dandelion seeds through this same grass, letting laughter fall from her lips like ribbons. And now, many decades later, the meadow remained. It had changed, yes, more silent, perhaps a little lonelier, but it had waited. It had remembered her name. She paused by a rock near the old olive tree, the same one her father had carved a cross into when she was 5. She traced it with a trembling hand. The wood was older, cracked, weathered, and so was she. Yet somehow, both the tree and the woman stood. She exhaled. "Lord," she whispered, "I didn't know where else to go." And then, as if the air itself leaned in to listen, she heard it. Not a voice of thunder, not a miracle of fire, but the soft, familiar hum of his nearness, like a lullaby remembered only in the heart. He was there. She could not see him, not with her eyes, but she felt him beside her, like a warm shawl laid across her shoulders, like a candle lit within. And in that quiet moment, something lifted. Not everything, not the grief or the fatigue or the questions, but something, a breath of peace, a gentle stillness. He was not solving her life. He was simply sitting beside it. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. You don't have to understand everything. You don't have to be strong. You just have to be here and let him be with you. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. You are seen. You are remembered. Even when the world forgets, Jesus does not. He still walks with you through meadows only he and you remember. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? Psalm 27:1. It was a small room, tucked behind the chapel at the edge of the village. Not many people came here anymore. The priest had passed on 5 winters ago, and the new one, though kind, had a younger flock. The old building sighed under the weight of years, its wooden beams groaning quietly as the evening wind stirred through the cracks. But still, one candle remained lit every night. Someone no one quite knew who would come just after dusk. Unlock the chapel's side door with a brass key worn smooth by use. Step in without a sound and light it. It was not a tall candle, not grand or ornate, just a simple beeswax taper in a clay dish near the altar. Its light was humble but faithful, and it never missed a night. Tonight, it was Thomas. He had turned 81 last month, lived alone in the little white house behind the baker's shop. His wife, Eloise, had been gone 6 years now. His son lived far away. The days were quiet. The nights were quieter. And yet, something in him still stirred with the dusk. So each night, when the sky softened into its deep indigo hush, he would reach for his coat, tie his scarf with slow hands, and walk the short path to the chapel. No one asked him to do this. He just did, because it mattered, because light should never have to go out, not if someone could keep it burning. And so, as the evening pressed in and the shadows crept along the wooden pews, Thomas knelt before the little dish. He struck the match with care. His fingers trembled, but the flame held steady. The wick caught, and once again, the light returned. He lingered, not in prayer exactly, but in presence. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. Jesus was there, and somehow the The silence between them was enough. He thought of Eloise and the way she used to hum when she folded the laundry. He thought of the night they lost their little girl and the ache that had never really left. He thought of all the mornings he'd waited and the nights he had endured. But here, with this little flame flickering, none of it felt wasted. All of it had led him here, and the light still burned. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Even when the world forgets your name, even when time moves on without you, God does not. He still sees the flame you tend, and He calls it beautiful. Bedtime, spiritual takeaway. You are a keeper of light. Your quiet faithfulness matters to God. Even the smallest flame can warm the heart of heaven. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for His name's sake. Psalm 23:3. The rain had begun quietly, as most gentle things do. No thunder, no storm, just a slow, steady tapping on the roof of an old stone cottage nestled near the edge of the forest. The kind of rain that hushes everything, even the worries you forgot you were carrying. Inside the cottage, Ruth sat by the window. She had been waiting not for anyone in particular, but for something, a sense of peace, a word from the Lord, a reason, perhaps, to keep believing that the path of her life still led somewhere sacred. Outside, the winding forest trail glistened, each puddle a mirror for the grey sky. Moss lined the stones. The trees held their breath. It was the kind of day most would stay inside. But Ruth had always loved the rain. When she was younger, she used to walk that path barefoot, just to feel the wet earth beneath her soles. She remembered how her mother would call after her, "Don't catch cold, child," but never truly stopped her. The path had known her since she was 10, and even now, at 75, it remembered her. So when the teapot whistled and the fire gave its gentle pop, Ruth set it all aside. She wrapped herself in her old shawl, the one her grandmother had knit, and stepped out into the mist. Each step was soft. Each step was prayer. She didn't rush. She didn't need to. The path welcomed her as an old friend, not demanding anything, not leading anywhere urgent, just being there, with her, in the rain. And as she walked, Ruth began to speak, not loudly, but simply, almost like breathing. "Lord, I don't know what I'm looking for anymore." Silence. Then a bird rustled softly in the tree above. "I used to be sure," she continued, "used to feel you in everything. Now." She paused beside a stone she used to sit on as a girl. It was slick with water, but she sat anyway, letting the rain baptize her silver hair. "Now I just miss you," she whispered. Her voice broke there, and then a warmth settled on her shoulders. Not from the rain, not from the earth. It was the unmistakable hush of the Saviour's nearness. She didn't need to see him. She knew. He had been walking the path too, in the same rain, waiting by the same stones, just for her. She wept, not from sorrow, but from relief. He had never left, even in silence, even in seasons of not knowing. He had stayed. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. You don't have to find the way on your own. The path still remembers your steps, and Jesus still walks it with you. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. You are not lost. Even when the path is quiet and the sky is grey, Jesus is walking right beside you. He never left. He never will. Even to your old age and grey hairs, I am He. I am He who will sustain you. I have made you and I will carry you. Isaiah 46:4. There was a chair, old and sun-warmed, upholstered in faded floral fabric, with little threads that had come loose over time like wisps of memory. It sat by the window in Grace's living room, facing the east. Always the east. She had moved it there herself 32 years ago when her husband passed. It was the best place to see the sunrise, the best place to sit with a cup of tea and cry without being seen, but also the best place to pray. Grace never considered herself a woman of eloquence. She didn't pray with poetry. She didn't quote many verses aloud. She just talked to Jesus, like he was sitting in the empty chair across from her, as if he could hear every sigh and answer every silence. And oh, how he had answered. Not always in the way she'd wanted, not always with a fix, but with presence. Even on the mornings when her joints ached too much to get out of bed, even on the days when the world felt like a place for younger voices and stronger hands. The chair waited, and so did he. Grace had told him everything in that chair, about her fears, her disappointments, her longings. She'd prayed for her daughter through rebellion and for her own courage to forgive. She'd wept for her son, whose silence had lasted too many years. She'd prayed for friends long buried and neighbors long forgotten. And through it all, that chair remained, a witness, a sanctuary, a place where heaven bent low. Tonight, the house was quieter than usual. The clock ticked like a heartbeat. The sky outside the window darkened slowly into navy. Grace sat down, the familiar cushion cradling her tired frame. She folded her hands gently, reverently, and before she could even begin, she felt it, that sacred hush, that presence, the same as always, and yet new again. Lord, she whispered, voice nearly too soft to hear, you're still here. And he was. No trumpet, no thunder, just the soft warmth of love that doesn't need to speak. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Even when the room is still, even when no one else is listening, Jesus hears. He always has. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. Your prayers are not forgotten. Every word, every silence, every sigh, he hears them all. He is closer than the breath in your chest. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1:5. There was a house at the edge of the hill. It wasn't grand. White paint peeled softly from the siding, and the porch creaked like an old hymn. The shutters leaned slightly, as if tired from holding so many years. But the window, the one window on the upper floor, always had a lamp glowing behind it. Always, no matter the season, no matter the storm. Some said it was left on by habit. Others said it was for a son who'd left and never returned. Still others, those who had grown old in that town, believed it was something more. They whispered that the lamp was for the weary, for the stranger who had nowhere to turn, for the widow who needed a sign that someone still watched the road. And in a way, they were right, because inside that house lived a woman named Elsie. She had lived there for nearly 60 years. She'd buried her husband too early, and her only brother even earlier. She had grown accustomed to silence, but not untouched by sorrow. And so, one winter night, decades ago, when the snow was falling hard and the road below had disappeared into a white hush, she lit the lamp, not for herself, but for someone, just in case, she had whispered. And ever since, she'd never let it go dark. Sometimes, she'd sit by it late into the night, rocking slowly in her chair, praying, humming, watching. Other nights, she'd simply glance at it before bed. One flicker, and her heart would rest. Not because she knew who would see it, but because she believed someone might need it. And the truth was, they did. There were stories. A traveler who had lost his way in the fog and spotted the glow. A young girl running from home who changed her mind after seeing it from the hill. Even a tired mailman who paused once in the snow and felt though he could never explain it, that someone was praying for him. Elsie never asked questions. She just kept the lamp burning. And tonight, as the sky turned deep indigo and a thin frost laced the porch railings, she rose again. Her bones were slower, her hands more careful, but her heart just as sure. She lit the lamp and whispered for whoever needs it. Then she sat down and Jesus sat with her, not in a vision, not with drama, but in the warmth of the light, the stillness of the room, and the knowing that what is done in love is never forgotten. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. You may feel small. Your efforts may feel unseen, but the light you tend reaches farther than you know. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. Your quiet faith can be a beacon for others. Even when you don't see the impact, your love still lights the road for someone else. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. Isaiah 43:2. The river did not rush. It moved gently, slowly, as if it too had grown old with time. By day, it shimmered under the sun, but by night, it sang, not with words, not with melody, but with something deeper, a kind of whisper woven into the current, a rhythm only the soul could hear. And Sarah, she heard it. Her small cottage sat near the bend of the river, a place few visited, but one that had become a sanctuary to her heart. She had lived through much loss, change, Years of loneliness that came and went like fog, but through it all, the river remained. It did not fix anything. It didn't erase her grief or rewind time, but it sang. And somehow, that was enough. On this particular evening, Sarah wrapped herself in her old shawl, the blue one her husband had bought for her in their early years. She stepped onto the wooden porch and lowered herself slowly into the rocking chair. The stars were beginning to gather. The wind was cool. The world was quiet, except for the song of the river. It lapped softly at the shore like a lullaby, each sound a thread, weaving memories and hopes into something sacred. Sarah closed her eyes. "Jesus," she whispered, "I miss them." She said no more. There was no need. He knew, and the river sang back, not in answer, but in presence, a soft assurance that she was not alone, that her tears had not been wasted, that every moment of sorrow, every night of waiting, had been held in his hands. She had spent many nights like this, not searching for miracles, not demanding signs, just sitting by the water and letting the Lord meet her there. Sometimes he came in a memory, sometimes in a breeze, sometimes in a peace so deep it left her breathless. But always he came. Tonight, as the stars deepened and the sky turned the color of velvet, she leaned her head back. The chair rocked gently. The river continued its song. And Sarah, she drifted into rest, not from weariness, but from peace. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. The waters may rise, the nights may linger long, but he is near. Even the river sings of his presence. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. When words fail, and when sleep feels far away, even the quiet rhythms of the world carry his voice. Let the peace of his nearness sing you to sleep. I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst. John chapter 6:35. In a house that had long since grown quiet, there was still bread on the table. Not fresh, not steaming, no, not anymore. But there it sat, covered gently by a cloth, waiting. The kitchen belonged to Esther, a widow for 21 years now. No children, no nearby family. Just the sound of the old grandfather clock in the hall and the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards beneath her steps. Every evening, before the sun dipped completely behind the ridge, she would place 2 small slices of bread on a ceramic plate, the blue one with the chipped rim. She would fold a napkin beside it, pour a little water in a glass, and wait. It wasn't for guests. No one came anymore. The neighbors had their own lives. The phone seldom rang. But she still set the table, still made room, still believed that someone might sit with her. She'd begun this quiet tradition the year after her husband passed. Loneliness had pressed in hard that winter, and one night, with her heart aching and her soul trembling, she had whispered, "Jesus, if you're real, come sit with me. And then she set the table. She didn't hear footsteps. She didn't see a vision, but she felt warmth, deep, quiet, lasting. And ever since, she made a place for him, not out of superstition, not out of routine, but out of love, out of hope, out of the sweet ache of faith. Some nights she'd sit in silence. Some nights she'd hum an old hymn. But always she would whisper a few words, just enough to say, "I know you are here." And the bread, it never felt wasted. Tonight was no different. The light outside dimmed into amber. The sky softened into a sleepy hush. Esther placed the plate gently on the table and sat across from it, her hands folded, and she breathed. "Thank you for staying," she whispered. And in the quiet of that little kitchen, where no one else could hear, Jesus answered, not in sound, but in nearness. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Even when no one knocks at your door, even when the chair across from you stays empty to the world, you are never truly alone. Bedtime, spiritual takeaway. Jesus does not need an invitation to love you, but when you make space for him quietly, faithfully, he fills it. Every time, he will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings, you will find refuge. Psalm 91:4. In the soft light of a fading afternoon, a quilt lay draped over a cedar chest. Its colors were gentle, soft rose, worn cream, faded blues, patterns stitched by careful hands decades ago. Every thread held a memory, every square a prayer. Agnes had been sewing quilts since she was 16. She made them for every grandchild, every niece, every friend who lost someone or was expecting new life. She stitched blessings into every border, peace into every corner. And now, in her 87th year, her hands moved slower, but still moved. The quilt before her was special. It was the last one she would finish, not because anyone told her so, but because she could feel it in her bones, a knowing. It was time. So she sewed not with sadness, but with gratitude. Each morning she would sit by the window, her fingers weaving colors and threads into something warm, something holy. She whispered names as she stitched, old names, lost names, names that still lived in her heart like fireflies. And sometimes she would talk to Jesus. "This one's for you, Lord," she'd say softly, "for whoever you choose." Because Agnes wasn't making it for anyone she knew. She was simply offering it, a covering, a blessing, a gift for a soul in need. Tonight, the final thread was pulled through. She knotted it slowly, carefully. Then she folded the quilt tenderly, reverently. And as she did, she paused. The house was still. The world outside darkened into its hush. And in the center of her chest, a warmth, a whisper, "Well done." Tears gathered at the edges of her tired eyes. But she did not cry. She simply held the quilt in her lap, and let the presence of Jesus settle around her like a soft shawl. He was there. He had always been there, even in every square, every thread, every silent hour of faithful work. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. The things you make in love, even the quiet ones, are never wasted. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. God sees every stitch of your life. Every act of love you've sown into the world is part of His covering. You are wrapped in more grace than you know. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with him, and he with me. Revelation 3:20. The hearth had not gone cold, even though the house had long ceased to echo with children's laughter. Even though the chairs around the table sat empty more often than not, the fire still burned. Lena had tended it every evening for years, not because she needed the heat, not even because the house was drafty, but because she wanted the flame to be there, should anyone come. In her younger days, Lena and her husband had built that fireplace stone by stone. She remembered the way he whistled while he worked, the way the mortar would streak his fingers, and the way they had dreamed of long evenings filled with guests, stories, and laughter. For a while, those dreams lived, but as the years unfolded, children moved, friends passed, time quieted the house. And yet, the fire remained. She lit it each night with care, arranged the kindling, whispered a little prayer, not for warmth, but for welcome. Lord, she'd say softly, if someone's looking for a place to land tonight, let them see the light. She meant it, literally. Sometimes a neighbor walking home through the trees, but she also meant it spiritually. She hoped someone, somewhere, might glance toward her house and feel, even if just for a flicker, that God was still near, still waiting, still welcoming. Tonight, as the last light of day melted into soft navy, she struck the match. The flame leapt up like a breath. The fire cracked, hissed, and slowly began its familiar lullaby. She rocked gently in her chair and listened, not for words, not for knocking, but for presence. And it came, not outside the door, but within her. Jesus had not passed her by. He had come in, year after year, quietly, faithfully. He had warmed her heart long after the world grew cold. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Even when no one visits, even when your door remains unopened, He still comes. He keeps His promises, and He always brings the warmth with Him. Bedtime, spiritual takeaway. You may feel forgotten by the world, but Jesus sees every fire you tend. Every act of quiet hospitality invites His presence. You are never truly waiting alone, and your Father, who sees in secret, will reward you. Matthew 6:6. At the back of a little white house, hidden behind tall hedges and tucked between a weathered fence and the woods beyond, was a garden. It was not grand, no statues, no trimmed hedges, No gates of iron or signs of pride, just soft earth, rows of herbs and flowers, tomatoes on the vine, lavender by the fence, marigolds and rosemary planted side by side like old friends. And it belonged to a woman named June. No one visited the garden. There were no guests, no tours, no applause. No one came to marvel at her dahlias or ask her for her recipe for healing salves. But still, every morning before the sun fully rose, June walked its quiet paths, with old gloves, a straw hat, and a prayer beneath her breath. Not prayers of need, but of thanks. "Thank you, Lord," she would whisper as she touched the blossoms. "For the time, for the bees, for the dew." Her body was frailer now, and the bending took time. But she knelt, she clipped, she pruned, and all the while she worshipped, not with music or ceremony, but with tenderness, with attention, with love. There had been seasons when she wondered, does any of this matter? Do you see this? Lord, these small offerings, these quiet gifts. But the answer had come, again and again, not in shouts, but in the way the lilacs bloomed extra full, the way the rain fell just enough, the way a tired heart could find rest among leaves and soil. Tonight, as the garden sighed into twilight, June sat on the old wooden bench beneath the apricot tree. The scent of basil lingered in the air. A few fireflies had begun their dance, and her heart, though worn from years, felt soft. "I don't need anyone to see," she whispered, closing her eyes. "You see," and he did, the gardener of her soul, the one who had planted dreams in her youth and watered them in secret through every season of her life. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment, even when your life feels hidden, even when no one watches or claps or notices. God sees, and He delights in the garden you've tended with love. Bedtime. Spiritual takeaway. Not all beauty needs an audience. The Lord cherishes what is done in secret, and He walks quietly through every garden of the soul. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely. Psalm 139, 4. It was tucked in the drawer, not in an envelope, not sealed with a stamp or even addressed, just folded once, neatly, with care. A letter, unsent, unread, but not unloved. Eleanor had written it 5 years ago, late on a Thursday evening when the ache of memory had pressed too tightly around her chest. The pen had moved slowly at first. She hadn't written a letter in years, but once the ink began to flow, so did her heart. Dear Joseph, it had been nearly 2 decades since her husband passed. She had spoken to him in her thoughts nearly every day since, but that night she needed to put the words down. She didn't write it for answers. She didn't expect it to be found. She just needed to remember, to speak of the years they shared, to say all the things time never allowed. I miss the way you used to hum in the kitchen, the way you warmed my hands on cold mornings, The way you always believed I could do more than I thought I could. She told him about the loneliness, the quiet birthdays, the way his chair still leaned in a little from the weight of his memory. She wept as she wrote, not from bitterness, but from love. And then she folded it. No final flourish, no signature, just folded it and placed it gently in the drawer beside her bed, where it remained. But here's what Eleanor didn't know. She wasn't the only one who had read it, because long before her hand touched the paper, long before her tears fell in the candlelight, Jesus had heard every word. He had seen the ache, felt the love, gathered the sorrow, and held it gently in his hands. He didn't need ink to understand her. He didn't need a posted letter to draw near. He was already there, by her side, reading between the lines of her heart. Tonight, she opened the drawer again. She didn't unfold the letter. She just rested her hand on it and whispered, "You saw it, didn't you?" And in the stillness of her room, the silence answered, "Yes, I did. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. You do not need perfect words for God to understand you. He hears the prayers you never speak. He holds the letters you never send. Bedtime, spiritual takeaway. You are fully known. Even your unspoken longings, your quiet grief, and your unsent letters are safe in the heart of God. My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest." Exodus 33:14. The chair creaked softly, back and forth, back and forth. It was an old thing worn smooth by years of use. The arms had grown glossy where hands had rested 1,000 times. The cushion had faded to a gentle grey blue, shaped perfectly by the weight of a small, quiet woman. Her name was Hattie. She had lived in the little house at the edge of town for longer than most folks could remember. Raised 3 children there, buried a husband, tended a garden, fed the birds. But at night, especially in these last few years, she would sit in the chair and wait for morning. Not because she couldn't sleep, not exactly, but because something about those early hours before dawn felt sacred to her. The darkness didn't frighten her. It felt closer, closer to something eternal, closer to God. And so she rocked, not in restlessness, but in rhythm, like a lullaby only her soul could hear. The chair became her chapel. Sometimes she would hum a hymn under her breath. Other times, she simply listened to the wind brushing the window pane, to the hush of the clock, to the whisper of Jesus drawing near. She would speak gently, "I know I'm getting older. Lord, I know I'm closer to seeing you face to face." And she would smile, not out of fear, but out of longing, because the one who had walked with her all her life, the one who had held her through childbirth and grief, through joy and uncertainty, he would be the one waiting on the other side. Tonight, the moonlight cast a silver glow through the lace curtains. Hattie rocked in steady rhythm, holding a warm cup in her hands, and as she closed her eyes, she whispered, what had become her nightly prayer. If I fall asleep here, Lord, and wake up there, let it be in your arms. And the rocking chair creaked its answer, back and forth, back and forth. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. There is nothing to fear in the darkness. Morning will come, and the one who holds the dawn is already beside you. Bedtime, spiritual takeaway. You are not waiting alone. Even in the quiet hours before morning, Jesus watches with you. His presence rocks with your soul, keeping time with your hope. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. Psalm 23, 2, 3. The sea was calm that evening. No crashing waves. No wind to speak of. Only the hush of tide meeting sand. Again and again. And walking slowly along the water's edge was a woman named Clara. She was barefoot, her cane tucked under her arm, just in case. But for now, she wanted to feel the cool sand beneath her toes, the familiar tug of earth holding her up. This beach had known her since she was a child. She'd come here with her father to collect seashells, come here with her husband to laugh in the surf, come here with her grandbabies, their small hands sticky with salt and joy. And now she came to remember. The shore did not speak, but it did not forget. It held every footprint, the deep ones left during seasons of sorrow, the light ones when joy had carried her weight, the uneven ones after surgeries, grief, and sleepless nights. And still, it held. So did Jesus. She had heard the poem once about footprints and sand. But this was different. This was not metaphor. It was memory. She could see her life stretched behind her, years upon years of footsteps, and the sea never letting go. Tonight, she whispered into the twilight breeze, I know I don't walk like I used to, but I'm still here. And she sensed it in her bones, the deep, unwavering truth that he was still walking with her, not behind, not ahead, beside. The tide rolled in, kissing her ankles. She stopped, watched her own footprints fill gently with water and disappear. Not gone, just carried. And somehow, that was enough. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Even when your steps feel slower, even when the sand shifts beneath you, Jesus is still steady, still walking, still carrying your story in the waves. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. Your journey is not forgotten. Every step you've taken, Jesus has known. And when you feel too tired to walk, he carries you beside the quiet waters. But I trust in you. Lord, I say, you are my God. My times are in your hands. Psalm 31, 14, 15c. The clock ticked softly, not loudly, not urgently, just faithfully. Tick, tick, tick. It sat beside her worn Bible, just as it had for decades. They shared the same small table, nestled in the corner by the lamplight, one telling time, the other telling eternity. Margaret sat in her armchair, her hands resting gently in her lap. She had always loved this time of evening, the quiet hour before bed, the space where the world grew still and her thoughts could finally breathe. She had stopped worrying about getting things done. There was no more rush, no more appointments to keep. No one was expecting anything. Just the ticking clock and the well-worn Bible and the presence of a Savior who never measured her by productivity. She opened to the Psalms, not to study, not to impress, just to listen. Her eyes traced familiar lines, some she had memorized long ago, when the children were small and the days so full she could barely hear herself think. Now she had time, and yet, even as her days slowed, she began to sense that her soul was still moving forward, not toward an end, but toward a home. She looked at the clock, its face cracked slightly, its hands still turning with quiet purpose. Then she looked at the word beside it, and she smiled. "One tells me how long I've been here," she whispered, "and the other tells me I've never been alone." Outside, the moon had risen high, casting silver across the rug. Inside, Margaret sat peacefully, held by the hush of passing time and the constancy of a God who transcends it. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. The days may feel long, the nights even longer, but your time is in His hands, and His hands are steady, even when the clock keeps ticking. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. Time may change everything around you, but it does not change God. His presence remains constant, steady beside every page, every hour, every breath. The Lord will watch over your coming and going both now and forevermore. Psalm 121:8. It stood at the corner of Elm and Waverley, a single streetlight, not fancy, not bright enough to draw attention, just steady. It had been there for as long as anyone in the neighborhood could remember. Children had played beneath it. Couples had kissed goodnight under its glow. Letters had been mailed just steps away, and lonely walks had paused there. But most of all, it had watched. Every night, without fail, it came on. Not with a flicker, not with a fanfare, just a soft hum and light. And in a little brick house just across from that streetlight lived Henri. He was nearly 90. His hearing had faded, his bones had grown fragile, but his eyes, especially in the dark, still found that light. It had become something sacred to him, a kind of companion. When the nights felt too long, when the world seemed to forget he was still here, he would pull the curtain aside and look at that glow and remember. He remembered walking home from the night shift, still smelling of ink and newsprint. He remembered watching for his daughter's bicycle to round the corner. He remembered waiting for his wife to return from choir practice, her silhouette passing through that little pool of light. So many memories wrapped in amber. One night, after a particularly hard day of silence, Henri sat by the window longer than usual. He stared at the streetlight and whispered, "Do you still see me Lord, I don't do much anymore. Just wait. Just remember. The street outside was empty. The world kept moving, but the light stayed on. And in that soft glow, Henri felt something stir. Not just nostalgia, but presence. Jesus didn't need to speak audibly. He only needed to remind Henri that even when the world seemed to forget, he did not. That little light on the corner wasn't just electricity. It was a reminder that someone still watches, that someone still cares, that even in the small hours of night, you are not alone. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. You may feel invisible, but there is a light that never goes out, a presence that watches every breath and holds every heart, even yours. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. God sees you, even in the quiet corners of your life. He watches with love. His light never flickers, and his care never sleeps. Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. Isaiah 43. The room wasn't large, just enough space for a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, a small framed photo on the wall. It smelled faintly of lavender and linen, and in the corner by the window sat a worn recliner where sunlight sometimes pooled in golden silence. This was where Elaine lived now, after the fall, after the surgeries, after the doctor gently said she should not be alone anymore. Her daughter had helped her settle here. It was a good place. The nurses were kind. Meals arrived warm. There were flowers in the hallway. But still, she missed her home. Missed the chipped blue mug in her kitchen. Missed the creaky floorboard outside the bathroom. Missed the sound of her own footsteps moving freely. Here, life moved slower, and her name wasn't spoken quite as often. She noticed it. Once, people had called her name with joy. Elaine, come sit with us. Elaine, can you help me with this? Now, it was mostly routine, sweet, but brief. Ms. Mitchell, time for your meds. Ms. Mitchell, your daughter's on the line. But Elaine, her name given in love, spoken with warmth, felt like a memory, until one night, she had been drifting in and out of sleep, the hallway light casting soft shadows across the ceiling, and in that space between waking and dreaming, she heard it. Elaine, not a voice from the hall, not a memory, but deeper, from within, a voice full of knowing and gentleness and eternal love. He had said her name, Jesus, not Ms. Mitchell, not Mom, but Elaine, the name he had always known, the one he had whispered over her when she was a child, the one he carried through every sorrow, every joy. Tears welled quietly in her eyes. He still knew her. He still called her. She wasn't forgotten. She wasn't invisible. She was his. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. God doesn't forget your name, even when the world speaks to you less. He speaks to you still in the quiet, in the dark, with love deeper than words. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. You are not just a face in the crowd. God knows you. He calls you by name, and He will never stop speaking love into the very core of who you are. The Lord your God is with you, the mighty warrior who saves. He will take great delight in you. In His love, He will no longer rebuke you, but will rejoice over you with singing. Zephaniah 3:17. There was no piano in the room, no choir, no organ, no hymn book resting open. And yet, the song was there, soft, familiar, wordless. It came like the hush before dawn, the melody of something once sung aloud, now whispered in the silence. It filled Ruth's room in the memory care wing. She no longer remembered the names of the nurses, not always her own birthday. Even her daughter's face would sometimes blur at the edges. But the hymn, oh, she still remembered the hymn. Great is thy faithfulness. Not always the lyrics, not every line, but the tune lives somewhere deep, deeper than memory, deeper than language. It was part of her now. Sometimes, when the afternoon light warmed her hands, she would hum, not loudly, not with strength, but with that tender, trembling tone that comes from a heart still reaching for heaven. And when she could no longer hum, when the days grew too long and the nights too still, she would hear it anyway, in the rustle of the curtains, in the sigh of the wind, in the way the Spirit moved through the silence. Jesus was singing over her, with her, for her. No words were needed, just presence, just love, just the hymn He had tucked inside her long ago. Tonight, the nurse paused at her door. Ruth was still, her eyes closed, her breath slow, but a smile curved her lips. And if you listen closely, you might have heard it too. That quiet song, the one that doesn't need music to be real. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Even when your voice fades, even when memory slips away, the song remains. And Jesus is still singing over you. Bedtime, spiritual takeaway. You are more than your memories. The Spirit of God sings over you with delight even in silence. His love remembers what your mind may forget. You have kept count of my tossings, put my tears in your bottle. Are they not in your record? Psalm 56:8. The fire had dimmed to soft embers. No more crackle, just a gentle red glow licking the stones like a fading heartbeat. And at the edge of the hearth, slightly worn, with one corner sagging low, sat the footstool. A simple thing, covered in faded plaid, edges frayed, buttons missing. But for Grace, it was sacred. Not because it was expensive, not because anyone admired it, but because for years she had knelt there, quietly, softly, night after night. She was never one to pray aloud in public, never the sort to stand up and speak when others wept. But this footstool, it had received every ache her heart had held. She had wept for her brother, there gone too soon, for her sister, whose anger had built too many walls, for her daughter, who left home at 18 and only wrote once a year, and she had wept for herself, for the disappointments she never spoke of, for the dreams she let die quietly, for the nights when hope felt like a stranger. Sometimes she would press her forehead to the cushion, not even speaking, just breathing, just offering her tears like prayers without words. And every single time, Jesus met her there, not to scold, not to explain, but to gather her tears, her sighs, her surrender. She believed what the psalm had said, that God keeps record, not in a cold ledger, but in a bottle, each tear precious, held close to his heart. Tonight, Grace moved slowly. Her knees weren't as forgiving, but still, she knelt. And the moment her hand touched that worn fabric, she felt him again, not in a rush, not in a flood of emotion, just presence, soft, real, steady. She whispered nothing, only sat in silence. And the Lord, he wept with her, not because she was broken, but because he loved her deeply. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Your tears are never wasted, even the quiet ones, even the ones that fall when no one sees. God gathers them all with gentleness, with reverence, with love. Bedtime, spiritual takeaway. Your tears are sacred to God. He sees each one and holds them as treasures. When you kneel in sorrow, he kneels beside you with compassion. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. John 10:9. It was a simple wooden gate, once painted white, now softened by the years into grey. The hinges creaked gently when the wind touched them, as though they too remembered every coming and going. It marked the entrance to a little cottage garden, roses curling up one side, ivy creeping along the bottom, and a winding path of smooth stones leading to the front door. The gate never latched, not because it was broken, but because Mrs. Evelyn never closed it. People should know they can come in, she would say, even if it's just to sit in the garden or say nothing at all. And they did. Over the years, neighbors came with casseroles and sorrows. Children stopped by with scraped knees and stories to tell. Friends came with secrets too heavy to carry alone. And Evelyn simply listened. No judgment, no fixing, just presence. A chair always waited by the rose bush. A pitcher of tea, no matter the season. A prayer, if one was asked for, but mostly a gate that never closed. Even now, long after her legs had slowed and the visitors came less often, Evelyn still walked out each morning and smiled at the open gate. She whispered, "Lord, let whoever needs rest find it here." And though her garden was small, the peace within it was vast. Jesus had walked those stones too, sat beside her when no one came, breathed in the lavender, watched the wind ripple through the leaves. He didn't need doors or walls to meet with her, only a heart that stayed open. Tonight, the sky was fading into soft navy. The garden was hushed, and Evelyn sat by the gate, wrapped in her shawl. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She simply watched and waited. The wind passed through again, touching the gate, swaying it just a little. Still open, still welcoming. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Your heart may feel quiet. Your home may seem still. But when you keep space for others, when you leave the gate open, Jesus comes too. Bedtime, spiritual takeaway. Every act of welcome is a doorway for grace. When your heart remains open, it becomes holy ground. Jesus walks through gates that never shut. For you have delivered me from death, and my eyes from tears, my feet from stumbling, that I may walk before the Lord in the land of the living. Psalm 116, 8-9. The lamp was small. Its base was porcelain, hand-painted with tiny lilies. The shade was slightly tilted, faded from years of quiet use, but it had stood beside Miriam's bed every night for more than 40 years. She didn't always turn it on. Only on the evenings when the world felt heavy, when the air seemed too still, and the darkness stretched longer than it should. On those nights, she would reach for the little brass chain, pull it gently, and wait for the soft golden light to bloom. And then she would rest, not because her problems disappeared, not because her body felt strong again, but because something about that glow reminded her of home. Not her childhood home, not even the one she had raised her children in, but a deeper home, a home her soul remembered, even when her mind could not name it. She had grown used to the quiet, used to the ache in her hips, the softness of her voice, the hush in the hall. But tonight felt different. The room was peaceful. A hush had settled, not the stillness of absence, but of presence. She sat up slightly in bed, her Bible resting open on her lap, and as she traced the margin with her finger, she whispered, "I'm ready when you are. Lord, I've seen enough light to know you'll guide me home." She smiled then, not out of sorrow, but relief. The lamp beside her flickered softly, not as if it were failing, but as if it knew. And in that moment, before her eyes closed for the final time, she saw him, not with fear, not with surprise, but with recognition. Jesus, the light himself, the one who had walked with her through every season, through every meadow, through every prayer by the fire. He had come for her, not with a trumpet, not with a host of angels, but with the same soft light she had trusted for years. He reached out his hand, and she simply took it. The lamp stayed on, just long enough. Then gently, quietly, it dimmed. But the light in her heart never went out. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. You are not afraid of the dark anymore, because Jesus is already standing at your bedside, ready to lead you home. And when the time comes, you won't be alone. Final bedtime spiritual takeaway. This life is not the end. You are being carried step by step by a Savior who knows your name and lights your way. Even in the last hour, His hand is warm, His love eternal. You're still here, and so is God. Take a deep breath with me. The first story has passed like a gentle breeze, but His presence has not faded. Before we begin the next story, place your hand on your chest. Feel the rhythm of grace beneath your skin, and know this: you are not forgotten. The Lord who held you through the last story is already walking into the next. Let's journey on, softly, together. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. Proverbs 3:5-6. Sometimes we don't need clarity, we just need peace. You've spent enough hours today trying to figure things out, trying to carry more than your share, trying to be okay, when maybe you're just not, and that's all right. Tonight is not for solving, not for fixing, not for being strong. Tonight is for being held. There's a gentle place here, made just for you. A space with no demands, no hurry, no loud voices asking for more. Just the quiet presence of Jesus and a story to calm the storm inside you. A story for the weary, the unsure, the ones who still have questions. You don't need to have the answers to rest. You just need to know someone holds the answers, and He's already holding you. So come, breathe slowly. Let the story carry you like a river, softly, toward peace. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. God is not asking you to understand everything, only to trust and to rest. Here I am. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person, and they with me. Revelation 3:20. The door was painted a soft green once years ago, before the weather peeled it gently to grey. Its wood had swollen slightly with rain, creaked in the winter, and stuck just a bit in the heat. But still, it waited. It belonged to a little house tucked behind a row of trees at the edge of town. A house that no longer heard much laughter, no longer heard footsteps running down the hall, just the soft rustle of wind against the siding and the clock ticking faithfully on the kitchen wall. Inside lived Harold. He had stopped expecting visitors a long time ago. Once, the door had opened every day. Neighbors with casserole dishes, children coming home from school, his wife returning from the market with her arms full and a smile on her face. But time has a way of closing doors gently, not with a slam, just a quiet drifting away. Now Harold moved slowly, made tea for one, read the same psalms over and over because they reminded him that God remembered his name, even when others didn't. But still, he left the porch light on, and he never locked the screen door, just in case. He whispered one night as he reached for the handle, "Someone decides to come." That evening, the rain came soft and steady. It tapped against the windows like a quiet invitation. Harold sat near the door with his old wool blanket, and a warm mug. And somewhere between the ticking clock and the gentle storm, he prayed, not out loud, not even with words, just the way his heart opened quietly, slowly, like an unlocked door. And though he didn't hear a knock, didn't see a figure on the porch, he felt it, a presence. Jesus hadn't used the knocker. He hadn't waited for permission. He simply entered through the quiet longing, through the space made ready, through the heart cracked open, just enough. And Harold knew he wasn't alone. Not tonight, not ever. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Jesus doesn't need a perfect welcome, just an open space. Even if all you have is a tired heart, he will enter gently. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. God stands at the door of your heart, not demanding, not rushing, but waiting with love. And when you open, even just a little, he comes in with peace. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. Lamentations 3:22-23. It was the east-facing window, the one that always caught the first light of day. Not dramatic sunlight, not always golden or grand, but a gentle brightness, like a soft whisper over the hills. Margie had always loved that window, even before her hair turned silver, before the world became quieter, before the children scattered like birds into their own lives. She had stood at that window every morning, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with a worn Bible in her hands, sometimes with nothing but silence and breath. It faced a small garden now overgrown, a few stones where daffodils still rose each spring, and beyond that, a wide sky, patient and pale. This morning, her legs ached a bit more than usual. The kettle took longer to whistle, and her reflection in the glass startled her. How time had softened her eyes, but deepened their knowing. Still, she walked over. Still, she stood there, facing the day. New mercies, she whispered, almost out of habit, almost out of hope. And as the sky shifted from deep blue to rose grey, something in her heart lifted. It didn't erase the weariness, didn't undo the loss, but it reminded her the story wasn't over. Morning still came. God still remembered how to paint the sky, and he hadn't forgotten her. She pressed her hand to the cold glass. "Thank you for showing up," she said, her voice catching. And just then, a bird landed on the sill, small, still. It looked in at her with something close to tenderness, and then, like a promise, it flew. Margie smiled. It was enough. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Even when nights feel long and days feel uncertain, the morning still comes, and with it, the gentle mercy of God. Hesar, bedtime, spiritual takeaway. God's love greets you at every sunrise, no matter what yesterday held. His mercies are made new with each dawn. You are not forgotten in the morning light. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. Psalm 23. B6a. The teacup had a tiny crack in it, right near the handle, barely noticeable, unless the light hit it just right. But Nora still used it every morning and every night. It had belonged to her mother, passed down not with ceremony, but with familiarity. It was the cup that had comforted fevers, celebrated small joys, and carried prayers on the steam of countless afternoons. Tonight, Nora cradled it in both hands, curled up on the edge of her worn sofa, the lamp behind her casting a soft golden pool of light, chamomile, simple, steady, like her life. She had never asked for much, and yet over the years she had given so much away. Time, quiet patience, kindness when no one noticed, forgiveness when it hurt, and sometimes she had wondered, Lord, if I keep pouring out, will there be anything left? But somehow, mysteriously, faithfully, the cup never emptied. Every time she gave, somehow there was still enough peace to sleep, enough grace to smile, enough hope to rise again in the morning. Tonight, as she sipped slowly, her hands steady though worn, she heard it in her heart, a gentle reminder, I am the one who fills your cup. It wasn't her strength, it wasn't her discipline, it was Him, the one who never let her dry out, the one who refilled her when no one else could see the emptiness. And as the tea warmed her chest, Nora closed her eyes. She was tired, but not depleted. The well within her had been touched by a source eternal. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Even when you feel like you've poured yourself out, God is still pouring into you. You are never truly empty in His hands. Bedtime, spiritual takeaway. Your life may feel poured out, but God never runs dry. He sees the quiet offerings you make and fills your cup again with peace, with love, with Himself. I lie down and sleep. I wake again because the Lord sustains me. Psalm 3:5. It had grown soft over the years, not in a worn-out way, but in a way that spoke of use, of whispers, of night after night filled with quiet conversation. The pillow on Helen's bed was no ordinary thing. It had held her head through decades of laughter, grief, dreams, and ache. It had absorbed her sighs when she could not find the words. It had cradled tears, some joyful, many silent. She didn't talk about it with others, but her pillow knew her. Every wrinkle on its surface was familiar to her. Every fold felt like the place where she had laid down burdens, only to wake up still breathing. Tonight, she smoothed her hand across it gently before lying down. The room was dim. The house was still. Her body reminded her of the long day she had lived, but her spirit longed for one more conversation. So she turned her head, as she had done for years, and whispered toward the dark, Jesus. It was enough. She didn't need to say more. He had heard every version of that word from her lips, the tearful ones, the grateful ones, the desperate ones, the ones filled with wonder. And each time he had leaned in, she remembered the nights he had carried her sorrow, the dreams that came like comfort, the mornings when peace waited for her like a robe on the edge of the bed. This was her sacred rhythm, not loud prayers, not polished thoughts, just her head on the pillow and her heart turned toward him. She closed her eyes and the whisper rose again. I trust you, even when I'm tired. And he answered, not in words, not in light, but in the settling peace that slipped over her like a blanket. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. God hears the prayers you whisper in the dark. He holds them close, and he answers them not always with solutions, but always with his presence. Bedtime, spiritual takeaway. Even your quietest prayers are sacred to God. When you lay your head down at night, he bends near. He hears every sigh, and he holds you while you sleep. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Psalm 37:7. It was a narrow wooden porch, just two old rocking chairs, a faded welcome mat, and the sound of wind threading through the trees. But to Edith, it was enough. She didn't go out much anymore. Her knees ached, her eyes blurred when she looked too long at the page. But every evening before the sky gave itself fully to night, she stepped out onto that little porch, not to do anything, not to fix, solve, or explain, but to wait. She had done her share of striving in life. She had made plans, kept schedules, managed households, and soothed many hearts. But this season was for stillness. So she sat, folded her hands in her lap, watched the changing sky. Sometimes a bird would land nearby. Sometimes a leaf would fall and rest on the railing beside her. But mostly it was quiet. And in that quiet, Jesus met her. Not in flashes of inspiration, not in prophetic visions, just in the nearness. The air itself seemed to hum with his presence. The rocking of her chair timed itself with something eternal. And though she spoke no words aloud, he heard them all. Because sometimes waiting isn't about what you get, but about who you wait with. And Edith, with her soft cardigan and gentle eyes, was not waiting for answers. She was waiting with trust. Even without words, she was saying, Lord, I believe you are here. I believe you know what I don't, and I am still with you. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. You don't always need to speak to be heard. God sees your stillness. He honors your waiting. And in your quiet, he comes close. Bedtime, spiritual takeaway. Sometimes the most powerful prayer is simply sitting with God. You don't have to speak. You don't have to move. Just be still and know that he is near. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Colossians 3, 12. It was soft with age. Wool, once sky blue, now faded to something gentler, like the color of quiet water just before dusk. The sleeves were a little stretched, the cuffs rolled from years of use, but her hand still folded it with care, as if it was something holy. Dorothy had made that sweater for her grandson before he left for college, before he grew too tall, before time moved faster than she expected. She hadn't seen him in a while now. Calls came less often, letters even less, but she still folded his sweater, still prayed over it, still believed her love could reach him through wool and whisper. Lord, she murmured, her fingers moving slowly. Wherever he is tonight, cover him. The motion was the same each week. Fold the sleeves in, smooth the front, hold it for just a moment before placing it back in the drawer. She didn't know if he even remembered the sweater, didn't know if he still wore it, or if it sat in some box far away. But that didn't matter, because for Dorothy, the sweater had become more than a garment. It was a place for prayer. Every time she touched it, she poured love into it, gentle, unseen prayers woven between stitches. Not grand prayers, not poetic, just simple things. Keep him safe. Let him feel you near. Remind him of who he is. And in that folding, she found peace. Because even if he didn't know, Jesus did. Jesus carried her prayers to places her hands could never reach. And somehow, she believed on cold nights, in hard seasons, her grandson might wrap himself in that old sweater and feel something more than warmth. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Every act of love, no matter how small, carries the weight of heaven. Your hands may feel ordinary, but God weaves your kindness into something lasting. Bedtime, spiritual takeaway. Your prayers do not need to be loud to be powerful. Even when folded quietly into fabric, God hears them. He carries them farther than you know. Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is and walk in it, and you will find rest for your souls. Jeremiah 6:16. The trees stood like old friends, bent slightly with time, their trunks mottled with moss, their branches stretched outward like arms remembering a long ago embrace. It was an orchard, yes, but to Agnes, it was more than that. It was memory. It was prayer. It was the place her feet had learned to trust the earth again. She had walked that path for over 50 years, first as a young bride, laughing beside her husband, apple blossoms falling like snow in spring, later with her children, racing ahead to pick the ripest fruit, then alone, her cane pressing into the worn soil. Each step a small act of courage. Even now, at 86, she returned, not to harvest, not to prune, just to remember. The orchard didn't demand much. It simply received her. And as she walked that familiar path, her hand brushing the low-hanging leaves, she whispered softly, "You still know me, don't you?" She didn't mean the trees. she meant the Lord, because somehow, when she walked here, she felt him, not as a far-off voice, not as a doctrine or a distant power, but as a presence beneath her feet, in the wind that nudged the branches, in the silence that wrapped around her like a cloak. She paused by the tree with the crooked limb, the one where she and her husband had once carved their initials. The letters had blurred now, but the love had not. She placed her hand on the bark. "Thank you for remembering," she whispered. And it wasn't just the orchard that did, it was Jesus. He had walked with her here in seasons of joy, and he had stayed in the hard years when loss made her feel like a stranger to herself. Now, even with each step slower than the last, she knew he still remembered her path, because he had walked it too. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. The paths you've walked in faith, even the ones others have forgotten, are never lost to God. He remembers. He walks them still, right beside you. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. You are not wandering. The old paths still hold the footprints of your faith, and Jesus walks them with you, step by step, remembering every mile. The Lord is close to the broken-hearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Psalm 34:18. It sat tucked beneath a book of poems, creased, folded twice, yellowed softly at the edges. The handwriting was hers, neat, careful, slightly shaky. No envelope, no stamp, no address, just a letter written to someone who would never read it. Her daughter. She had written it 5 winters ago, in the silence of a long afternoon when the ache of misunderstanding had settled into her chest like stone. They hadn't spoken in years, not since the words that were said too quickly, not since the words that weren't said at all. But the love, it never left. And that day, with the snow tapping against the window, she picked up her pen and poured her heart onto the page. "I don't need you to agree with me," she wrote. "I just want you to know I love you. I always have." She spoke of memories braiding her daughter's hair in the early light of school mornings, the way she laughed with her whole body, the softness of her hand tucked into her own during thunderstorms. She asked for nothing in return, no apology, no reconciliation, just the chance to say what love had always known. And when she finished, she folded it gently, held it to her heart, and placed it in the drawer beside her bed. She never mailed it, but that didn't mean it was lost, because God had read it. Every word, every tremble, every comma filled with longing. He saw the tears that fell when the pen stopped moving. He held the silence that followed, and though the daughter never saw the paper, somehow, over time, her heart softened. 2 years later, a call came, tentative, quiet. "Hi, Mom." And though the letter was never spoken of, the love inside it had traveled, delivered not by post, but by the Spirit. Tonight, as she opened the drawer and touched the folded paper again, She smiled. Love always arrives, even when the world calls it too late. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. The words you offer in love, even if they're never read, are never wasted. God carries them gently and delivers them with grace. Bedtime, spiritual takeaway. Even unspoken love can heal. When you give your words to God, He carries them beyond time and distance. Love always finds its way. Let this be written for a future generation, that a people not yet created may praise the Lord. Psalm 102:18. The quilt was heavy not with weight, but with memory. Folded at the edge of the bed, its colors soft from age, its fabric worn from warmth and holding. Every square had a story. Every thread was a prayer. Anna had begun it the year her husband passed. Grief had made her hands restless. Her heart ached for something to touch, something to stitch together while the rest of her world quietly fell apart. She didn't plan it. She just began. A piece of her wedding dress here, part of her son's baby blanket there, the hem from her daughter's first dance, a patch from her father's Sunday coat, and slowly as thread passed through cloth, and her fingers moved with quiet intention, her life came together in colors. The moments she thought were lost now lived between seams. Tonight, as she smoothed the quilt across her lap, she traced a square made of soft blue gingham, her mother's apron. She smiled, and the memory rose like a song. Biscuits warm in the oven, the hum of a hymn, the sound of love moving through the kitchen. She didn't need a photograph. This quilt was her record of hope, of survival, of laughter and long days and light through lace curtains. But more than that, it was her offering, because every stitch had been a prayer, and every time she wrapped it around herself, she felt something deeper than fabric. She felt Jesus covering her, comforting her, whispering, "None of your story is lost." Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Your life may not be bound in books, but every ordinary act, every sacred memory is being stitched into eternity. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. Your story matters. The small pieces, the worn ones, the beautiful and broken ones. God sees them all and weaves them into something lasting, something holy. But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. Corinthians chapter 4:7. It sat near the edge of the shelf, a little to the left of a row of old devotionals, and beneath a dusty painting of wheat fields in golden light. A jar, simple, clay, cracked. Its top was chipped on one side, its body veined with a fine line that ran from rim to base. It looked fragile, perhaps even forgotten, but Ruth hadn't thrown it away. She couldn't. Her mother had given it to her when she turned 21, long before wrinkles kissed her hands, long before her house became so still. "It's just a jar," her mother had said, "but it holds more than it shows." Back then, Ruth didn't understand. She thought strength was about being whole, about never breaking, never faltering, never being seen as less than. But life had taught her otherwise. She had cracked many times, not just once, when her husband left, when the diagnosis came, when the dreams faded quietly, one unspoken hope at a time. And each time the Lord had met her, not to erase the crack, not to make her untouched, but to hold her together with grace, to fill her despite it. That jar on her shelf became her mirror, not because it was perfect, but because it reminded her God chooses the broken, not because He needs to patch them, but because He loves to shine through what the world overlooks. Tonight, as Ruth sat with a blanket draped over her lap, she looked toward the shelf and whispered, "I'm still a bit cracked, Lord, but I'm still here." And in the quiet, she felt His smile. "You always were my treasure." Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. You do not need to be flawless to be full. God does not discard the chipped or the cracked. He dwells there. Bedtime, spiritual takeaway. Your imperfections do not disqualify you. In God's eyes, they make space for light to pour through. He treasures your whole, beautiful, fragile, faithful heart. In repentance and rest is your salvation. In quietness and trust is your strength. Isaiah 30:15. It was tucked under the old oak tree, half in sun, half in shade, a bench pane flaking, wood worn smooth from years of waiting bodies and bowed heads. The little stone chapel stood nearby, its white walls tinged with ivy, its bell quiet, now silent for seasons. But the bench still knew her name. Evelyn had sat there every Sunday for as long as her legs allowed. And when she could no longer climb the steps inside, she began sitting outside instead on the bench, listening not to the sermons, but to the breeze, the birdsong, the gentle rhythm of silence. At first, she felt like she was missing something, missing the hymns, the fellowship, the routine. But then the silence began to speak, not in words, not in teachings, but in presence. She began to feel it, that sacred hush, the way the wind stirred the leaves in patterns only God could design, the way the sun shifted through branches like stained glass, lighting her hands, her lap, her heart. She didn't need words anymore. She didn't need noise. She just needed space and trust and stillness. Each Sunday she came. The bench welcomed her. No pressure, no performance, just the chance to sit and be loved. And she was more deeply than she had ever known. Sometimes she'd whisper one line, "Thank you for meeting me here." And that was enough. Tonight, as the light dimmed and the first star blinked into the sky, she sat once more on the bench, wrapped in her shawl. No one else was nearby. The chapel was locked, but heaven was wide open. And the Lord, He was already sitting beside her. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Silence is not empty. It is full of the one who sees you, knows you, and waits for you with unhurried love. Bedtime, spiritual takeaway. You don't need to say much to be seen. In your quiet, Jesus comes near. Sometimes the loudest love is the love that simply stays. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. Psalm 119, 105. The pages had grown thin with time corners softened, edges frayed like a favorite old hymn. Some verses were underlined in fading ink. Some margins held quiet prayers, names written in the handwriting of a younger hand. But she could no longer read the words. The letters blurred now. No matter how close she held them, no matter the light, her eyes once so sharp, so faithful, had become dim with age. But her hands still knew the weight of that Bible, still knew how to cradle it, how to rest it on her lap like a sleeping child. This book had walked with her through every season, from childhood wonder to adolescent questions to the deep waters of adult sorrow. It had been her companion on quiet mornings, her comfort during long hospital nights, her anchor when grief came like a tide. And now, though her eyes could no longer trace the lines her heart still remembered, she didn't need to read the pages. They lived in her. Blessed are the peacemakers. I lift up my eyes to the hills. Fear not, for I am with you. Tonight, she held it again. The house was hushed. The lamp glowed dimly beside her. She ran her hand along the leather cover, smiling gently. I can't see you in the ink anymore, she whispered, but I see you everywhere else. And Jesus, he was there, not inside the words, but in the space the words had built within her, in the peace that still came, in the light that still lingered, in the nearness that had never left. The lamp of the word was still burning, even behind closed eyes. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Even when your eyes fail, even when your memory fades, the word remains, written now not just on paper but on your soul. Bedtime. Spiritual takeaway. God's word is not just something we read, it's something we carry. When the page grows dim, the Spirit still shines. What you've stored in your heart stays forever. How beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. Romans 10:15. They sat neatly by the door, not polished, not new, but faithful. The soles were worn thin in places. The laces had been replaced twice, and the leather had softened in all the places where time presses its thumb. They were her walking shoes. Mildred had worn them for nearly a decade. She never thought of herself as anyone special, never took up space in the loud places, but she showed up. To the neighbor who lost her husband, to the church kitchen on Wednesdays, to the woman at the post office who looked like she was holding back tears. These shoes had carried casseroles and flowers, prayers and silence, apologies and forgiveness. And when her joints began to ache, when the sidewalks seemed longer than they used to be, she still put them on, not to prove anything, not for attention, but because love walks tonight. As the evening wrapped itself around the little white house, she sat quietly on the edge of the bed, her hand resting on those shoes. She hadn't worn them in a few weeks. Her knees had protested too much. Her breath had grown shorter, but she couldn't quite bring herself to move them from their place because she remembered every doorstep they'd stood on, every floor they'd rested beside in hospital rooms, every hallway of someone else's sorrow they had entered without fear. They weren't just shoes. They were testimony. They told the story of a woman who went, even when it cost her, even when no one else saw. And in the quiet of her room, she heard him, not in sound, but in the warmth that swept across her spirit. I saw every step. Mildred smiled. That was enough. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Every act of love you've walked out, every mile, every visit, every step has been noticed. Jesus walks with you, and he remembers the paths your heart chose. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. Your footsteps matter. Every quiet journey of love leaves a mark on heaven. Even when your feet grow tired, the impact of where they've walked lives on. Let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Matthew 5:16. The candles sat at the edge of the table ivory white, wrapped in a glass jar, with just a faint scent of honey and lavender. But it wasn't for her. Rosa lit it every evening as the sun began to lower its voice, not to fill the room with fragrance, not for the gentle flicker it cast on her walls, but for someone else. Sometimes she didn't know who. Sometimes she did. It started one spring, after her neighbor's daughter went missing for 2 days. She'd felt so helpless, no words to offer, no way to fix it. So she lit a candle. "Let this light go where my hands can't," she whispered. And from then on, she lit one each evening, a small act, a quiet offering, for the man who slept on the church steps, for the woman in her Bible study who sat through the session in tears, for the nurse with hollow eyes at the pharmacy, even for the cashier who seemed too weary to lift her gaze. One by one, the flames became prayers. She didn't tell anyone. It was her hidden ministry, her silent intercession. Sometimes she'd pray by name. Sometimes just a whisper, "Lord, for whoever needs this most." The candle didn't shout. It didn't preach. But it warmed. It waited. It glowed in the dark. And Rosa believed with all her aging heart that God used every flame. That somewhere, a tired soul felt a flicker of hope they couldn't explain. A small stirring, a breath of light. Tonight, she lit another. Her fingers trembled slightly now, but the flame caught. She bowed her head. "For someone's lonely child tonight," she said softly. And as the flame danced in the hush of her room, Jesus watched and smiled. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Your light doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. Even a single flame offered in love can carry the warmth of heaven into the coldest places. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. Every hidden act of kindness burns with eternal light. When you lift others in quiet love, Your flame becomes a beacon. Jesus sees every candle you've lit. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. 1 Samuel 16:7. The mirror hung beside the hallway dresser, oval-shaped, framed in wood that had once gleamed, now dulled by years and soft dust. Clara used to look into it often to adjust her collar, to tuck back a wisp of grey, to glance quickly before Sunday service. But lately, she didn't look much anymore. What she saw now wasn't always easy. The deepening lines along her cheeks, the curve of her shoulders, slightly bent, the way her eyes looked, tired, soft, yes, but tired. She missed the younger version of herself, the strong hands that once held children's laughter, the confident voice that spoke in circles of women, the sparkle that used to dance just beneath the surface. And now, she whispered to herself more than she spoke aloud. "You've become invisible," she said once, staring at the reflection that didn't feel like home. But one night, as she passed by the mirror, something made her stop. The hallway was dim. Only the faint glow of a nearby lamp reached the glass. Her face was soft in shadow, but she didn't look away. And in that quiet hush, a thought came, not her own. This mirror can't see your heart. She blinked, stood still, because she knew that voice, the one that always spoke when everything else grew silent. And slowly, gently, she saw it, not in the reflection, but beyond it. She saw the prayers she had prayed when no one saw, the way she had held peace when others brought chaos, the love she gave even when she didn't feel worthy. All the things the mirror couldn't show. But God never missed. She placed a hand on the glass. "I'm still yours," she whispered, and heaven nodded. "Yes, and always." Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. You are not defined by what you see. The mirror doesn't tell your whole story, but God sees it all, and He calls it beautiful. Bedtime, spiritual takeaway. Your worth is not measured by the image in the mirror. God sees deeper past the surface, into the soul, and what He sees is precious beyond words. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your miracles of long ago. I will meditate on all your works and consider all your mighty deeds. Psalm 77:11-12. It was small, barely the size of a loaf of bread, a simple old radio with a dial that turned stiffly and a soft hum when the room got too quiet. Joan had kept it beside her bed for years. It didn't do much, didn't catch many stations anymore. The world had moved on to apps and screens and voices that came from nowhere. But she liked the weight of it, the sound of it warming up, and the way, every night at exactly 9 Choro P, it found the same gentle hymn. Abide with me, fast falls the eventide. The voice was never announced. There was no introduction, just the low hum of organ, and then the melody, like a soft hand settling over her chest. Every night, Same time, same song. She didn't know where the station came from anymore. Sometimes it fuzzed out near the end, but the first notes always made it through. And as the song filled the room, Joan would close her eyes and let the memories come. Her mother humming it in the kitchen, her husband whistling it as he packed for their anniversary trip, the choir singing it at her sister's funeral, slow, reverent, full of longing. But most of all, it reminded her of the nearness of God. Even now, even here, she didn't sing along anymore. Her voice had grown raspy, tired, but her soul still sang, lifting notes only heaven could hear. Tonight, as the hymn began once again, Joan rested her head on the pillow. She let the sound carry her like a river, soft and deep, and she whispered, "Thank you for staying. Even as the light fades, you're still here." The song continued, unrushed, unshaken, and she fell asleep mid-verse, held by the same tune and the same Savior who had never missed a night. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. There are songs only your heart remembers, and God sings them with you still. Even in the quiet, even in the dark, He abides. Bedtime. Spiritual takeaway. God speaks through the small things, an old song, a soft hum, a memory that won't let go. And even as the world changes, His presence stays the same. He sings over you still. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by so doing, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. Hebrews 13:2. It was always there, on the peg by the front door, just to the left of the umbrella stand. A long brown coat wool, soft to the touch, clean, mended, always ready, but never worn. Not by her, at least. Eleanor kept it there for someone else. Years ago, during one particularly bitter winter, a woman had knocked on her door, shivering, silent, her eyes full of a sorrow Eleanor never asked about. Eleanor hadn't done much, just brought her inside, offered soup, wrapped her in a coat she had just taken from the closet. That coat, the woman only stayed an hour. She said few words, but as she left, she looked back at Eleanor with something like awe. "You were Jesus to me today," she said, and Eleanor never forgot. The woman never came back, but the coat did. A few days later, folded on the porch rail, clean, dry, and warm. And from then on, Eleanor left it by the door, waiting for someone else who might come in from the cold, someone who might need warmth, not just for their body, but for their soul. She didn't talk about it, didn't make a mission out of it, but the coat stayed ready. Year after year, season after season, a quiet sermon hanging in woolen mercy. Tonight, as the wind howled gently against the window, she passed by the door again, paused, ran her fingers across the fabric, and whispered, "Let them know they are welcome, even before they knock." The coat didn't answer, but heaven did. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Your kindness might never be named, your hospitality never praised. But when your door stays open, your heart becomes a sanctuary. Bedtime, spiritual takeaway. Every quiet gesture of welcome matters. When you prepare room for someone in need, you prepare room for Jesus. He walks with those who knock, and sometimes He is the one knocking. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. Ecclesiastes 3:1. The clock no longer ticked. Its hands were still, both resting just past 7, as if frozen mid-thought. A quiet hush had settled inside its frame, but somehow it still kept time, not in minutes or seconds, but in moments. It sat on the mantel in Ida's sitting room, an old brass-framed thing, once wound faithfully each Sunday evening. She had stopped winding it some years ago, when her fingers grew stiff and her days no longer demanded the ticking. Visitors often asked, why not fix it? But Ida would only smile. It still knows, she'd say, and it did, because every day, at just the right moment, whether it was the way the sunlight touched the photo of her late husband, or the sudden arrival of a bird at the window, the clock seemed to come alive again. Not in sound, but in memory. Each hour had left its imprint. The hour she said yes. The hour her first child cried. The hour the diagnosis came. The hour she chose to forgive. The hour she sat in the pew, alone but not alone. Though the hands did not move, the time had not been lost. Tonight, Ida sat in her chair with a blanket around her knees. The room was dim, the fire low. She glanced at the clock, as she always did, and felt that familiar warmth. God didn't need ticking hands to keep her life in motion. He knew the rhythm of her breath, the pace of her healing, the turning of her seasons, and He had never been late. She whispered, "You're always on time, aren't you?" The silence answered, "Yes, always." Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Even when it feels like time has stopped, God is still moving, still weaving, still perfectly in rhythm with your life. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. You are not behind. You haven't missed your moment. Even when life feels still, God's timing is perfect. Every season is held gently in His hands. By day, the Lord directs His love. At night, His song is with me, a prayer to the God of my life. Psalm 42:8. It came to her softly, not through a radio, not from memory, but through sleep. The kind of dream you don't wake from startled, but hushed, still wrapped in peace. It had been years since Miriam last sang. Her voice, once warm and clear, had faded with time, like a candle that burned low, but never out. She used to sing in church, on wooden pews with a hymn book in her lap, at the kitchen sink, washing dishes, in the car with children in the back seat, laughing between the verses. But lately, she'd forgotten the words. The melodies escaped her. She tried once, humming to herself, but her voice cracked, and she gave up. "I guess I've run out of music," she had said to the Lord one night, not bitterly, just quietly. But then came the dream. She didn't remember falling asleep, only the moment the song began. No words at first, just the sound of comfort, like the warmth of sunlight through closed eyes. Then the melody, rising like a tide, familiar and unknown at the same time. She heard her name woven into it, not spoken, sung, and somehow she knew it was him, Jesus, singing over her. Not because she had performed well, not because she had anything left to give, but because she was his. The song wrapped around her, a lullaby made from grace. And when she woke, the room still dark, her body still aching, her soul was glowing. The song was gone, but it had stayed, echoing in a place beyond memory. She whispered, "Thank you. I didn't know you still sang to me." And the quiet replied, "I never stopped. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Even when your voice fades, God sings over you. At night, in silence, in dreams. He covers you with a melody made only for you. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. You are being sung over. Even when you have no song left, Jesus has not gone silent. His love finds you, even in sleep, and carries you in his tune. The people living in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. Matthew 4:16. It wasn't a bright light, not the kind that floods a room, just a little lamp on the nightstand, with a flickering bulb that glowed soft and golden, like a candle that had learned how to wait. Lillian never turned it off. She knew it wasn't necessary. She wasn't afraid of the dark anymore, not like she once had been. But still, she left the light on each night, without fail. It wasn't for seeing, it was for remembering, because something in her heart needed to know that even in the darkest hour, light was near. There had been many dark nights, nights when the pain in her body refused to sleep, nights when memories crept in like shadows across the wall, nights when heaven felt silent and her prayers had no words. But every time, the light stayed on. Tonight, she was more tired than usual, not just in her bones, in her soul. Not sorrowful, just ready. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded on her lap, the light casting its warmth across her lined face. She looked toward the far corner of the room, and for a moment, she thought she saw a figure standing there. No fear, only peace. She smiled softly. "Are you here?" No sound, but in her chest, yes, the light of the world, the one who had held her through every midnight, the one who had sat beside her for years, even when the room seemed empty. He had always been there, and he was still here. She lay back gently, pulled the blanket to her chest, and whispered, "Stay with me until morning." And he did, not with noise, not with glory, but with presence, a warmth that didn't come from the lamp, a light that didn't need electricity. As her eyes closed, and her breathing slowed. The night held her like a cradle, and the light never left. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment, even when the world goes quiet, even when your breath grows slow. The light of Christ remains. He stays until morning and beyond. Final bedtime spiritual takeaway. You are not alone in the night. The light of Jesus stays with you through every fear, every ache, every hour. Even when you sleep, He keeps watch. You are safe in His presence. The night has deepened, but the light has not gone out. Perhaps your eyes are growing heavy, or your heart has softened with holy stillness. Let these next words find you not in striving, but in surrender. Let the next story be a lullaby for your soul. You don't need to hold on so tightly anymore. God is already holding you. Let's rest more deeply. As the next story unfolds, He will quiet you with His love. He will rejoice over you with singing. Zephaniah 3:17. You made it through another day. Somehow, with tired hands, with a heart carrying more than most can see, with thoughts you didn't know how to put into words. And now, it's evening. The world outside has slowed, but inside, maybe you're still holding on, still thinking, still aching, still waiting. Let go, just for a little while. You don't have to carry everything into the night. You don't have to figure it all out before sleep. Let this be your quiet place, a space not filled with answers, but with presence. Let this story hold you. Let Jesus meet you in the gentle rhythm of words and the hush of rest. He's already here, not waiting for you to be strong, just waiting for you to be still. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. You've done enough today. God is near, and this story is for you. Cast all your anxiety on Him, because He cares for you. As Peter 5:7, it wasn't a place people talked about, just a quiet bend in the river where the water curved slow and wide like it, too, was learning to rest. The trees leaned in close, their branches like arms outstretched to hold the sky, and just beneath them, a single wooden bench. That's where Mary went. Not every day, but often enough that the grass knew the shape of her shoes. The birds grew used to her silence. She didn't come to walk. She didn't come to think. She came to let go. It had started years ago when her husband died, and the world felt louder than she could bear. She found the riverbank by accident, but once she sat down, she knew God had been waiting there all along. Now, when life pressed too hard, when the bills stacked up, when the phone didn't ring, when the mirror felt unfamiliar, she came and sat and breathed. She never brought a list, never rehearsed what to say. She just held her heart like a bundle in her lap and let it spill gently, wordlessly into the open air. Lord was usually all she said. The river did the rest. Sometimes it whispered. Sometimes it roared in spring. Sometimes it barely moved, as if waiting too. She imagined Jesus sitting beside her, not with answers, but with a soft, steady hand resting on hers. One day, She came with a heart full of grief, old regrets, names she hadn't spoken aloud in years. She sat longer than usual, eyes closed, hands open, and in that space, she let go. Not in a grand release, but in small breaths. A little sorrow here, a bit of fear there, a memory, a hope, a prayer without words. And though nothing changed around her, the trees still bent, the river still flowed, something shifted inside. Peace rose like mist, not loud, not bright, just enough. She stood, not stronger, but lighter, and the river kept moving. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. You don't have to carry it all. There is a place to lay it down, and Jesus is already waiting there, not to rush you, but to hold you. Bedtime. Spiritual takeaway. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means trusting the one who carries you. You are not alone at the river's edge. Jesus is beside you, always ready to receive what you can no longer hold. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord. Colossians 3:23. The basket was nothing special. Woven straw, slightly uneven. One handle wrapped with old fabric to keep it from splintering. It sat by the front door, where the morning light would touch it for just a moment before slipping into the kitchen. But inside that basket was a quiet kind of love. It held envelopes sometimes, fresh muffins wrapped in wax paper, a small card, handwritten in gentle cursive. Sometimes nothing at all, but it was always ready. Marjorie had kept it there since she turned 60. She never said why. She just called it her yes basket. I keep it by the door. She once told a neighbor, so I never forget the life waiting beyond it. She'd fill it in the early morning, sometimes with something small, a lemon from her garden, a clean pair of socks for the shelter, a note that simply said, "You're remembered." And then she'd ask quietly, "Lord, where do you want this to go?" She never made a list, never planned it out. She just walked where love led her. Down the street, to the post office, to the nurse who looked tired, to the woman who stopped coming to church. Her steps weren't big. Her voice wasn't loud. But her yes was faithful. Every time she left the house with a basket on her arm, she believed deep down that the little offering it carried might be the very answer someone else had been praying for. And it often was. On winter, she placed only a scarf inside, soft purple, hand-knitted. She didn't know where it should go. She walked the block, prayed, waited. Then she saw her girl by the bus stop, bare arms crossed, eyes down. Marjorie approached slowly. "I thought maybe you could use this," she said, offering the scarf like it was treasure. The girl looked up, eyes wide, and whispered, "How did you know?" Marjorie just smiled. "I didn't, but he did." Tonight, the basket sat quietly by the door once more, empty, but never forgotten, always ready. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. You don't have to do grand things to be faithful. You just have to say yes in small ways with a willing heart. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. Every quiet act of love matters. When you live with a heart ready to say yes, even the smallest kindness becomes a holy offering. And God always knows where to send it. Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. Matthew 25:40. She made it every morning. Same way, same rhythm. Smooth the sheet, fluff the pillow, tuck the corners in with quiet care. The guest room had been empty for years. No footsteps on the carpet, no voices echoing down the hallway. Just the gentle ticking of the clock and the quiet sound of habit. But still, she made the bed. Agnes didn't know why she continued. She just knew she couldn't not do it. Her hands moved slowly these days. A little more ache in the fingers, a little more sigh in her bones. But as she folded the quilt back into place, something inside her whispered, "This is for someone, not just anyone, someone holy." Because it had never been about the guest list, or the appearance, or even the hope that family might visit someday. It was about readiness, about living a life prepared even in the quiet, even when no one's watching. Sometimes she would sit at the edge of the neatly made bed and pray, "Lord, if you ever send someone, let this feel like welcome." One day, a storm rolled in. Power lines snapped. Neighbors came knocking. "Do you have room?" She nodded. And that night, as a mother and her frightened daughter curled up in that little room, Agnes brought them tea and tucked in the quilt she had folded 1,000 times. It felt like a chapel. Later, when the rain had passed and they left with hugs and quiet tears, she sat back down in that room, looked at the bed, the same way she always did, and whispered, "Thank you for coming," because somehow she knew it wasn't just the guests who had come that night. Jesus had too. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Even the things you do in silence, the faithful habits no one sees, are seen by God. And one day, He may use them in ways you never imagined. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. Your unseen faithfulness is not wasted. Every small act of readiness is a door left open for grace. And when you make space in love, Christ Himself may enter. The Spirit and the bride say, "Come," and let the one who hears say, "Come." Revelation 22:17. It hung above the chapel doorway, a single bronze bell, weathered by years of wind, with a rope that swayed gently when touched. No one rang it anymore. Not really. The congregation had grown smaller. Sundays were quieter, and the man who used to pull the rope with joyful purpose had gone home to the Lord years ago. But still, it stayed, and every Thursday morning, just after sunrise, a woman named Elsie came to ring it. She didn't ask permission. She didn't explain herself. She just showed up with her grey coat buttoned to her chin and a thermos of tea in her bag. She'd walk the winding path up the hill, stand beneath the bell, and pull. Once, the sound wasn't loud, not like it used to be. It echoed gently across the valley, a low, faithful tone that lingered more in the heart than the air. And then she'd sit on the wooden bench nearby, close her eyes, and listen to the silence that followed. She didn't ring it for anyone in particular. She rang it for those who needed mercy, for those who hadn't yet found their way, for those too tired to come looking. She rang it in case someone, somewhere, might hear it in body or spirit and remember they were invited. Lord, she would pray quietly. Let this bell remind someone they are still welcome. And sometimes they came. Not often, not in crowds, but every now and then a stranger on the path, a man with eyes full of questions, a girl walking her dog who stopped and asked, "Why do I feel peace here?" Elsie would smile and say nothing more than, "The bell is for you." 2. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. You may feel like your life rings into empty places, but the sound of your love travels farther than you think. God can use even your quiet invitations to draw hearts back to Him. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. What you offer in faith, even if it feels like no one hears, is never lost. God turns your simple invitations into echoes of grace. Someone is listening. Even now, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the one who takes refuge in Him. Psalm 34:8. It hung on the back of the pantry door, a pale blue apron, soft from years of washings. The pocket torn a little at the edge, a faint smudge of flour near the hem that never quite came out. It still held the scent of cinnamon and warm bread, and something else harder to name, something like hope. Marie had worn it nearly every day for 4 decades, not out of habit, but out of devotion. She believed cooking was sacred, not fancy cooking, just meals made with hands that prayed while they stirred. She cooked for her family. She cooked for the lonely. She cooked for the grieving, the joyful, the tired, the returning. She cooked for the Lord. Each morning, she would tie that apron around her waist and whisper, "Jesus, make something good out of these hands." And somehow, He always did. Even on the day she felt hollow, even when her arthritis flared, even when she had no idea who might walk through her door, there was always enough. Enough soup, enough strength, enough grace. Because Marie didn't just feed bellies, she fed souls. She believed that something warm in a bowl could make someone believe again, not in food, but in love. And now, even though her stove sat cold more often than hot, she still touched the apron when she passed, still remembered the prayers she'd whispered into its threads, still believed that even the smallest offering, made with warmth and butter and the quiet compassion, could change the atmosphere of a heart. One afternoon, a young woman knocked on her door, a granddaughter of a friend. too thin, too quiet, eyes hollow from something unspoken. Marie didn't ask questions. She just reached for the apron, and once again, the house filled with a scent of hope. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Your kindness offered with your hands, your heart, your table matters deeply. Jesus is still using your love to feed more than just hunger. Bedtime, spiritual takeaway. The things you make in love meals, memories, soft spaces for others, carry the fragrance of Christ. Every warm gift, offered with compassion, becomes holy in His hands. Let us acknowledge the Lord. Let us press on to know Him. As surely as the sun rises, He will appear. He will come to us like the rain. Hosea 6:3. There was one window in the house that faced the open field, wide, quiet, and full of sky. It wasn't the grandest view, just golden grass and old wooden fence posts. Sometimes a few cows on the far side, and clouds that wandered by like thoughts unspoken. But for Nora, that window was holy. She had spent many afternoons there, sitting in her favorite chair with a blanket over her knees, watching the horizon and waiting, not for someone, not for news, but for rain. It had become her ritual. The dry seasons came more often now, and some days the land looked thirsty like her soul had once felt, parched, cracked in places. But she believed the rain would come, eventually, and so she watched, even when the sun shone hard, even when others said it was foolish. She sat and waited and whispered softly, "Lord, let it come when you're ready." The window didn't offer many promises, just the slow drift of time, but it did offer light, and in that light, Nora prayed for the world, for her neighbors, for her own dry places. She learned that hope doesn't always roar in. Sometimes it tiptoes. Sometimes it lingers just outside the glass. One evening, as she sat with a cup of tea in her hands, she noticed the shift. The air went still, the clouds thickened, and then the sound, soft at first, then sure. Rain. It traced silver paths down the window pane. It touched the earth like mercy. Nora didn't move, just closed her eyes and let the tears fall quietly. Too, not from sorrow, from arrival. The waiting hadn't been empty. It had prepared her to receive. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. There are seasons when the rain feels far away, but even in those dry days, God is coming, quietly, faithfully. Bedtime. Spiritual takeaway. Hope doesn't forget. It watches patiently, believing God's goodness will arrive like rain on thirsty ground. And when it does, your waiting will not have been in vain. Even to your old age and grey hairs, I am He. I am He who will sustain you. I have made you and I will carry you. Isaiah 46:4. The little chapel on the hill was almost always empty on weekday mornings. Sunlight slipped through stained glass like spilled honey, and dust floated through the air as if time had slowed down inside. There, in the third pew from the back, Mrs. Ruth came every Thursday. She walked slowly now. The cane helped. A gift from her daughter years ago, oak with a carved handle, worn smooth where her palm had held it again and again. But each time she entered the chapel, before she sat, she would walk straight to the front, step by small step, and lean her cane against the wooden cross that hung by the altar. It wasn't loud. No one clapped. No one noticed except heaven. Then she would turn, walk slowly back to the pew, and sit for an hour, sometimes longer. No words, no requests, just presence. When someone asked her once why she left the cane there, she smiled. "Because he carries me for a while," she said, and somehow he did. Her back straightened, her breathing deepened, and though she always picked the cane up again before leaving, she never left quite the same. There was something about placing her weakness at the foot of the cross that made her strength feel real again. Not loud, but alive. The cane leaned like a prayer in wood, an offering, a declaration. "Here, Lord, this is yours too." Tonight, the cane rested beside her bed, still near, but somehow lighter. And Ruth, before drifting into sleep, whispered once more, "Thank you for carrying what I cannot." Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. You don't have to carry it all. Even your weakness is welcome at the cross. Jesus is not asking you to be strong, only to come. Bedtime, spiritual takeaway. God never grows weary of holding you. When you lay your burdens at His feet, even the ones you've carried for years, He leans close, lifts gently, and walks with you until you're ready to stand again. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. Psalm 119, 105. It was soft now. The leather cover curled at the edges, creased from years of hands pressing it open, closing it in prayer, holding it against her chest during long, silent nights. Some pages were folded. Some had tiny tears. Others had notes scribbled in the margins, dates, prayers, names underlined with trembling ink. It was June's Bible, a simple one. No fancy tabs, no golden edges. But if you held it gently, you could hear it breathe, because it had been with her through it all. She called it her whispering book, not because it made sound, but because, in her loneliest hours, it felt like the voice of God came through its pages in words meant just for her. There was a section in the Psalms where the paper had thinned from so much turning. She could almost see through it now. She often rested her hand there, as if it were the place her soul knew best. When her husband passed, when the news came from the doctor, when the house grew too quiet, the Bible never stayed closed. She didn't always read whole chapters. Sometimes just a verse, sometimes just a word. She let it fall open, not randomly, but faithfully. And every time it opened exactly where it needed to. It felt like wings, not the kind that fly away, but the kind that lift. Tonight, as June settled into bed, she held the Bible gently in her lap, opened to the crease in the Psalms, ran her fingers across the lines, and whispered, "Still here." And the Lord, through the word that never fades, whispered back, "So am I." Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. You may feel fragile. You may feel like pages worn by time. But in God's hands, your story still breathes, still speaks, still soars. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. The Word of God is alive. It meets you where you are, holds your weary heart, and speaks peace into places too deep for words. Even now, He is whispering through its pages, "My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life." Psalm 23, 5-6. It sat on the small table by her rocking chair, an old ceramic cup, pale green with tiny faded flowers. The rim was chipped, the handle slightly cracked, but still, it was her favorite. Mildred had used that cup for decades. Morning tea, evening cocoa, water in the heat of summer, warm broth when her hands ached from winter. But it wasn't just a cup. It was a promise. She had first received it as a gift from her mother, a quiet woman who once whispered to her, "Use this whenever you need, reminding you are not forgotten." And over time, it became sacred, not because of what it held, but because it never truly emptied. Even when the drink was gone, something stayed, a feeling, peace, provision, presence. She'd lift it after long, lonely afternoons and feel her spirit fill up, not with liquid, but with grace. One day, after a difficult phone call that left her heart heavy, she made a cup of tea and sat by the window. Tears fell quietly, but she didn't wipe them away. She held the cup in both hands and prayed aloud, "Lord, I feel empty again." She closed her eyes, and somehow, the warmth of the tea reached deeper than usual. The silence around her thickened, not in loneliness, but in presence. She felt seen, filled, not fixed, but no longer hollow. That night, as she placed the cup on the shelf, she noticed something she hadn't before. The words etched on the bottom, faint but clear now in the lamplight. "Beloved, you are held." She smiled. Of course, the cup had never just held tea. It had held memory, mercy. God, take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Even when you feel poured out, God is still pouring in. Your cup, though chipped, though simple, will never run dry in His hands. Bedtime, spiritual takeaway. You're not running on empty. God's grace fills even the smallest places. He is the cup that never empties, the love that never runs out, the peace that always returns. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely. Psalm 139, 4. The envelope was never sealed. It sat tucked between pages in an old recipe book, creased, and yellowed. The ink faded to a whisper. No stamp, no address, but every line was real. Joanna had written it one evening after everyone had gone home, and the house felt too big. The kind of quiet that presses in, the kind that makes your thoughts feel louder than they are. She sat at the kitchen table with a cup of lukewarm coffee and her old pen, the one she used to write birthday cards. She didn't know who the letter was for, only that she needed to let the words out. So she wrote, "Dear someone, dear Lord, dear maybe me." It wasn't neat. Sentences spilled over each other. Half thoughts, heart prayers. She wrote about the ache she still felt, even though the loss had been years ago. She wrote about her regrets, the things she wished she had said when there was time. She wrote about how sometimes she still didn't feel strong enough to pray out loud. She apologized for crying too much and for pretending too often that she was fine. And at the end, she wrote one line she hadn't expected. "Do you still see me?" When she finished, she folded the page, placed it in the envelope, and slid it into the book, thinking she might burn it later. But she didn't. She left it there, forgot it, almost, until one afternoon, years later, she opened the recipe book looking for her mother's banana bread instructions. And the letter slipped out. She picked it up slowly, held it like something sacred, and began to read. Tears rose, but not from sorrow, because somehow she no longer felt like the woman who wrote it. She had been carried not by her own strength, but by someone who had read every word long before ink met paper. She whispered, "You saw me even then." And she folded the letter again, not to hide it, but to hold it close. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. God hears even the words we never speak, even the silent letters, the prayers that never left the page. He reads them all and answers with love. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. Your unspoken prayers are never lost. God sees your heart, even in the quietest ink, and He holds your words close, even the ones you never send. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1:5. It flickered sometimes, buzzed a little in the wind, but it never went out. That small yellow porch light had been glowing for nearly 30 years, night after night, on the old farmhouse at the end of Willow Lane. It wasn't fancy, just a simple bulb behind frosted glass, switched on every evening by a woman named Clara. She was nearly 90 now, bent at the shoulders, knees that creaked with each step. But each dusk, just as the sun gave one last breath of gold across the trees, she would step out onto the porch, flip the switch, and whisper to herself, still open. No one had lived with her for many years. The children grown, the neighbors long gone or moved away. Still, the light stayed on. "I leave it in case someone comes home," she once said with a soft smile. No one should have to return in the dark. And sometimes they did. A niece with tear-streaked cheeks after a hard year, a neighbor who needed a quiet place after losing his job, even the postal worker once stopping to rest in the glow of that little lamp after a long, rainy route. Clara never turned anyone away. The porch had 2 rocking chairs and always a warm blanket folded on the arm. Sometimes people stayed for only minutes, other times hours. But what they remembered most wasn't the tea or the conversation. It was the light, that steady, faithful glow that said, without speaking, "You're not forgotten. You are welcome. You can come in." Tonight, Clara sat in her chair, watching fireflies blink out beyond the yard. The porch light hummed beside her, gentle as ever. She reached out, touched the base of the lamp, and whispered again, "Still open. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. God's light never goes out, even when the world feels dim. He keeps the porch light on, inviting, welcoming, waiting with open arms. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. You are always welcome in God's presence. His light never burns out. No matter how far you've wandered or how late it feels, the way home is still lit with love. He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge. Psalm 91:4. It wasn't the prettiest quilt, no matching colors, no perfect pattern, just square after square of fabric, each piece holding a story, stitched slowly by hands that had learned to pray with needle and thread. Helen called it her promise quilt. It draped across the end of her bed like a soft memory, frayed in the corners, a little faded now, but warm, so very warm. She had begun sewing it when her children left for college. 1 square for each child, then 1 for her husband, 1 for her sister who lived across the country, 1 for her pastor, 1 for the widow across the street, 1 for the nurse who held her hand during that difficult appointment. Each fabric square was chosen not for beauty, but for meaning, and on the back of each piece, hidden between the seams, she had written in pencil a verse, a prayer, a promise from God's word. Her stitching was slow, often interrupted by tears or music or bird song through the open window. But every time she picked it up again, she whispered, "Lord, cover them with this." And somehow, he did. That quilt had been wrapped around her daughter after heartbreak, held across her husband's knees during his final days, carried to a neighbor who lost her home, folded gently into the arms of someone who just needed to feel held. And now, in her old age, Helen kept it nearby, not for show, but for shelter, because even when her body ached, even when her memory slipped, the promises remained. Tonight, as wind tapped lightly against the window, she pulled the quilt up to her chin, ran her fingers across a corner square, the one stitched from her mother's apron, and whispered, "Your promises still hold, Lord." Then closed her eyes in peace. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. God's promises are not threads that fray with time. They are coverings woven with grace, stitched with faith, wrapped around you with love. Bedtime. Spiritual takeaway. You are covered by promises that never fail. Even in the night, even when you feel small or forgotten, God wraps you in His word and holds you close beneath the shelter of His care. My times are in your hands. Psalm 31:15. It hung quietly above the mantel, a round, wooden clock oak frame, cream face, black hands, simple, softly ticking. Tick, tick, tick. It had been there since the house was built, gifted to Irene and her husband on their wedding day, engraved on the back in his time. For years, it marked the hours of ordinary life. Breakfast, laundry, phone calls from the children, evenings with books, midnight feedings, afternoons filled with the smell of soup and song. And when her husband passed, the ticking didn't stop. She almost wished it would, but still, tick, tick, it was steady. And over time, that sound became something more than just passing moments. It became comfort, a quiet reminder that time did not rule her, that her life was not slipping away into nothing, that every second was held intentionally, lovingly by a God who wastes nothing. She began sitting beneath the clock more often, rocking slowly, whispering prayers in rhythm with its beat. Sometimes, when anxiety crept in, she would place her hand over her chest and feel the sync between heart and tick. It was as if grace had its own heartbeat, patient, unhurried. Sure, she no longer feared time, she honored it. She learned that God does not rush healing. He does not panic when years feel lost. He redeems. Tonight, the house was still. The fire had gone low. A book lay face down on her lap. And from the wall came that familiar music. Tick, tick. She smiled in the dark. Thank you, Lord, she whispered, for holding all my moments. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Time does not own you. It does not define your worth, nor diminish your hope. You are not late. You are not behind. You are right where God has you, and He holds every second in His loving hands. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. Grace does not rush, and neither does God. Even the quiet ticking of your life is held in His rhythm, slow, sacred, and full of love that never fades. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10. It sat on the porch, weathered but strong. A wooden rocking chair with arms smoothed by time. Its seat dipped from decades of sitting, and its legs creaking softly with each slow sway. No one really noticed it anymore. It wasn't painted. It didn't shine, but it had waited through every season. Summer storms, autumn winds, winters of silence, springs full of green hope, and it always rocked. Just a little, even when no one sat in it, as if remembering the rhythm of presence, a body, a prayer, a story whispered under breath. It had belonged to Elaine's grandmother, passed down like a sacred song, and now, in her older years, Elaine had returned to it. She liked to sit there after dinner, wrapped in a shawl, cup of tea cooling in her hands. She didn't need noise or answers or company, just the slow movement, back and forth, back and forth. There was peace in the rhythm, the kind that whispered of things that didn't need fixing, just tending, just trusting. She would often pray with her eyes closed. No words needed, just the wind, the rocking, and the gentle knowing that God was with her in the stillness. She had rocked through grief, through healing, through quiet revelations that only came when she stopped trying to understand and simply rested. And the chair had waited, always, through seasons of doubt, through days when she didn't want to speak, through nights when tears traced her cheeks. It waited, just like God. Tonight, the stars blinked softly above. The moon wrapped the porch in silver. Elaine rocked slowly and whispered, "I'm still here." And in the stillness, the breeze seemed to echo back, "So am I." Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. You don't have to move fast. You don't have to prove anything. There is a grace in the waiting, and Jesus meets you there, rocking gently, holding every breath with love. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. Stillness is not emptiness. It is a space where God speaks softly, waits patiently, and rocks beside you in every season. You are safe to slow down in His presence. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. Psalm 23:6. They stayed tucked right where she left them, beside the bed, to the left, toes pointed outward, ready. Old felt slippers, worn nearly flat at the heel, edges frayed from time and tenderness. A soft grey colour that once was blue. Margaret hadn't walked far in years. Her legs didn't carry her like they used to, and most days, her world stretched only from the bedroom to the living room window. But the slippers still waited. Every morning, she would swing her legs over the side of the bed, place her feet gently into them, and whisper a prayer. Another day. Lord, thank you. She didn't travel much anymore, didn't drive, didn't visit the market, but her days were still full with quiet gestures, soft hymns under her breath, and letters written in careful script. Sometimes she laughed at the thought, I haven't gone far. Lord, but maybe love doesn't need to travel far to matter. She used to believe that purpose meant movement, but now she saw it just meant being present, even in the same chair, with the same slippers, in the same room where morning and evening met like old friends. Once, her granddaughter asked, "Don't you get tired of staying here?" Margaret smiled. "Oh, I'm not stuck. Honey, I'm planted." And even planted things bloom. She looked down at her slippers, those faithful little shoes that had walked hallways, paced nurseries, stood at hospital bedsides, and carried prayers on quiet mornings. "They're tired now," she said softly, "but they still fit." That night, before turning off the lamp, she straightened them just so, and whispered, "Thank you for following me, even when my steps are small." Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. You don't have to go far to be deeply loved or to matter in the kingdom. Even slippers that never leave the room can carry a soul faithfully home. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. Your life is not measured by the miles you've walked, but by the love you've carried. Even in small, slow spaces, God is with you, steady, kind, and always near. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. He will watch over your coming and going both now and forevermore. Psalm 121, 5, 8. It was just a small lamp, nothing fancy. A glass base, a warm linen shade, a gentle bulb that gave off a golden hush. Edith had kept it by her bedside for as long as she could remember, always turned on at night, even when electricity was expensive, even when others teased her gently, saying, "Don't you know you can sleep in the dark?" She would smile and reply, "Yes, but I like to be reminded there is light, even when I close my eyes." It wasn't about fear, not anymore. It was about comfort, about being held in the soft glow of something that didn't leave when she wasn't looking. As the years passed, the lamp became more than light. It became a companion through long, aching nights, through the silence after the phone stopped ringing, through times when the tears came quietly and without warning. It was always on, always there. When she grew older and sleep became lighter, she would often wake for a moment, turn her head, and see that soft light still shining. And every time, she would whisper something like a prayer, sometimes just a name, sometimes just a sigh, sometimes only 2 words, "Still here." And she would drift back to sleep with a kind of peace that didn't come from knowing everything would be fine, but from knowing she wasn't alone. One evening, her niece came to visit, noticed the lamp glowing softly, and asked, "Aunt Edith, you still sleep with the light on?" She smiled, eyes warm. "Sweetheart, when you've seen as much darkness as I have, you begin to treasure any light that stays." She reached for her Bible, the one with pages worn like a well-loved path, and placed it next to the lamp. And as night deepened and sleep gently took her hand, the light stayed, just as it always had. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Even when you close your eyes, even in the darkness, God's light does not leave. He watches. He stays. He keeps the lamp burning not for fear, but for love. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. There is a light that never goes out. Even when your eyes grow tired, even when your soul grows quiet, the love of God remains glowing softly beside you, watching over your every breath. Blessed are those who wait for him. Isaiah 30:18. They sat by the door, always pointed outward. A pair of brown loafers, leather worn smooth across the top, soles scuffed just enough to show years of purpose. They belonged to George. He hadn't worn them in a while, not since the doctor told him to rest more, to take shorter walks, to slow down, but he still polished them every Saturday, buffed them with an old rag, pressed his thumb into the sole to test for wear, tucked the laces in neat, and then he'd place them by the door facing out. His daughter once asked, "Dad, why do you keep doing that if you're not going anywhere?" He smiled, didn't rush to answer. Instead, he looked at the shoes for a long moment and whispered something that stayed with her for years. "Because I want to live ready to go if called, ready to step out if someone knocked, ready to walk if God opened a door." He believed faith wasn't just about being still, it was also about being willing, not anxious, not restless, but prepared. And so, each evening, as he passed by that quiet corner near the door, he would glance down and think, maybe tomorrow, Lord, maybe there will be someone who needs me to walk with them. Sometimes there was a neighbor who needed help fixing a gate, a widower who asked if George would sit on the porch a while, a child who waved from the sidewalk, and each time George would smile, slip on those shoes, and go. But even on days when no one came, he kept them there, faithfully facing outward, because the waiting was never empty. It was filled with quiet expectation, the kind of hope that comes from knowing God can call at any time. And when He does, you'll be ready. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. You don't have to strive. Just stay willing, stay open. Keep your shoes near the door and your heart ready to walk in love whenever He calls. Bedtime, spiritual takeaway. Faith is not only patient, it is prepared. Even in stillness, you are invited to be ready to love, to serve, to follow. Your simple readiness honors God more than you know. Who may stand in His holy place? The one who has clean hands and a pure heart. Psalm 24, 3, 4. It sat by the kitchen sink. Porcelain, chipped on the rim. A faded floral pattern barely visible under years of gentle use. Inside, it rested a small bar of soap, fragrant, simple, always damp from the washing. Martha had used it for decades. Same dish, same spot. She didn't think of it as anything special. But one day, as she slowly lathered her hands, watching the suds circle the drain, she paused. Something about the moment stilled her. She looked down at her hands, the veins, the lines, the spots that had come with age. These hands had held babies, written letters, washed dishes after funerals and birthdays, folded laundry, folded in prayer. And now they were still working, still serving. She thought of the verse, clean hands and a pure heart. And suddenly, this wasn't just a soap dish. It was an altar. She began to whisper prayers as she washed. Lord, cleanse not just my hands, but my thoughts, my worries, my weariness. She began to offer her moments here, this ordinary task, this quiet rhythm of water and soap as worship. Sometimes she would pause just to run water slowly. Let the warmth remind her of grace. Other times, she would hold her palms open over the sink, as if to say, "Here I am again. Use me, Lord, however you want." And God did. He met her there, in that tiny sacred space beside the faucet, between meals, before prayers, after tears. He met her in the soap dish, not because her hands were perfect, but because they were willing. Tonight, she rinsed her fingers one last time before bed, dried them slowly on a towel, and whispered, "Thank you for holding what I bring, even when it's small." Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. There is holiness in the simple things, even in soap and water, even in worn hands and quiet kitchens. God sees it all, and He calls it beautiful. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. Your smallest routines done with love become sacred. God isn't looking for perfection, just presence, just hands offered back to Him, clean or weary, resting in grace. Even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day. Psalm 139:12. Every night, just before turning off the lamp, Eleanor walked slowly to the window, the same one she'd looked out of for 40 years. She would pull back the curtain, rest her hand on the sill, and look up into the sky. Sometimes the moon was full and round, casting a soft glow across the backyard. Sometimes the stars scattered like tiny blessings. Other times, it was just cloud and quiet. But still she stood, always, and whispered, "Good night, Lord." It was a habit that had begun when she was young, back when her grandmother taught her to pray not just in church, but in windows. You see more clearly from here, her grandmother had said, not just the sky, but your soul. And Eleanor had never forgotten. In her younger years, she would stand there after long days of raising children, after days of grief, after moments of unexpected laughter. In her older years, the words grew shorter, but the meaning grew deeper. Sometimes she would name children, friends, neighbors, even strangers. Sometimes she would just breathe, letting the window be a threshold between her weariness and God's watchful eye. It wasn't just a view, it was a place of release. One evening, her neighbor saw the light still on and asked kindly, "Waiting for someone?" Eleanor smiled. "Oh no," she said. "I'm just saying goodnight to the one who never sleeps." And she meant it. There was comfort in the stars, but more than that, there was comfort in being seen from the other side. Each night, she'd whisper a little something, a thank you, a sorrow, a name, a sigh. Then she'd close the curtain gently, turn off the light, and sleep in peace. Not because the night was always kind, but because the one who made the night was always near. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Your whispered words in the dark, they are not lost. They drift upward like incense, and God hears everyone. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. Even your smallest prayers are seen, whether spoken aloud or barely breathed in the dark. God is near. He stands at the window with you, watching, listening, loving. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also. John 14:3. It was a quiet night. No thunder, no wind, only the soft hush of leaves brushing the side of the house and the slow, steady breath of someone deeply at peace. Agnes had been tired that day, not with the ache of sorrow, but the kind of weariness that feels like surrender, like rest was calling, like home was near. She had brushed her hair gently, put her Bible on the nightstand, open to Psalm 23, lit the little lamp that never burned too bright, and slipped beneath the quilt that had kept her warm for decades. She didn't pray out loud, didn't say goodbye, only rested one hand on her chest and whispered, "I'm ready." And then she closed her eyes. She did not hear the creak of the floorboards. She did not see the soft light that filled the room. But if she could have, she would have seen him. Not with trumpet or thunder, not with fire or noise, but with gentleness, a presence so deep it silenced even the clocks, a hand so kind it stilled every fear. Jesus came, not because she earned it, not because she was perfect, but because she belonged. He stood at her bedside, the way a shepherd comes for his sheep, not rushing, not demanding, just present. And he reached down, touched her hand, and said softly, "Come with me." There was no pain, no fear, only warmth, only peace. Her breath stilled, her body rested, but her soul, it rose like a whisper caught in the arms of eternity, like a bird finally free. And in that quiet room, where slippers waited and a lamp still glowed, he took her home. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. One day, it will be your time too. And when it is, he will come, not in panic, not in judgment, but in love. And you won't be alone. You will be carried. Final bedtime spiritual takeaway. Jesus will come for you, gently and surely. You are not forgotten. You are not lost. When your final breath is near, it will not be the end. It will be the beginning of being fully, forever, home. The stories are done now, but the presence remains. You may not remember every word, but your heart remembers the warmth. God came close tonight, not with thunder, but with silence, with tenderness, with truth. As you drift into sleep, know this: you are not alone. You are not forgotten. You are not too late, too broken, or too small. You are beloved, held, watched over. Even now, even here, Jesus is whispering your name. Close your eyes and fall into the arms of the one who never sleeps. Shalom, dear soul. Sleep in his peace.